Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team. I'm Yetta Decker, and today my sidekick is Matt Mayo with McLean Law Services. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Awesome to have you here. So we're going to talk about a topic that we haven't actually covered in detail on any of our shows. So if you haven't thought much about secondary dwellings, in-law suites, that kind of thing, duplex type units, I guess, would fall under secondary dwelling?
Actually, secondary dwelling is any dwelling in a primary residence that is not disconnected and doesn't actually make up a duplex. So once you get into duplexes and threeplexes and that sort of thing, it's actually not a secondary dwelling unit. It's a second primary dwelling unit, and you'd have to be zoned for that.
Okay, so two totally different things.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a great thing for all of us to know, because I think out there we think of if it's got two living spaces sort of in one home or attached to one home, because duplexes could be up and down, so kind of the main floor of a space and then a lower level, or could even be three. It could be a triplex. Yeah. One's in the basement, and then there's a middle, and then there's a top. Yeah, exactly. But they're treated differently because the zoning is different than, say, a single-family residence with a secondary dwelling unit attached.
Yeah, typically your secondary dwelling unit is the single-family home that then has a granny suite or a basement apartment added to it.
Okay, or we call it an in-law suite today.
Or an in-law suite.
Because, it could be grandpa, it could be sister, it could be...
No, exactly.
Right, it could be all kinds of people living in them. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So before we get too deep into the whole secondary dwelling units, because that's our topic of conversation today, let's talk a little bit about your law firm.
Oh, yeah. We're a boutique full-service law firm. We offer services in real estate, civil litigation, some criminal, and then will preparation and that sort.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So real estate law, this is the place to go.
It is.
And the name of the company again is?
McLean's Lawyers.
Okay.
Professional corporation, technically, but
okay,
McLean's
well, let's
Lawyers.
not get too technical here. Okay, perfect. And it's a family business?
It is. Yeah, so I'm the junior at the firm.
You're younger than the senior?
I'm younger than the senior, who is my father-in-law, Ian McLean. He's been practicing for around 35, 36 years, has a wealth of experience in numerous areas of law.
Okay, and we've actually done a show previously with Ian, and so if you want to go into our archives, or maybe actually you're watching this one already in an archive situation, so you want to go and look for another one, and we cover different topics every time we talk to a lawyer that has an in-depth knowledge base on a particular topic. So secondary units. What do I have to think? If I want to buy one, what do I have to think about?
When you're purchasing, there's a certain amount of risk in purchasing a unit, a house that already has a unit in it, in that you don't actually have any first-hand knowledge whether the construction was legal, whether the proper permits were obtained, and whether the construction actually meets code and the regulations.
And I would tell you that most of the time they don't.
Which is risky. It's risky because it can involve fines, orders from the city or other authorities to correct situations, and in worst case scenarios, if you know that your unit is not to code, it could result in civil liability should the worst happen and somebody be hurt or killed. So it's risky. You need to exercise your due diligence, even though you know that in most situations the seller and real estate agents and inspectors are all operating above board and with the best intentions.
Okay, perfect. So how does a secondary dwelling unit differ from somebody just finishing living space in, say, a basement? A new unit is not created. With just finishing a basement, you add in a TV room or something, a bathroom, even a secondary kitchen doesn't particularly create a secondary dwelling unit. A secondary dwelling unit is intended for to be rented out to a separate resident, and would typically involve a separate entrance or that sort of thing. And now there's lots of homes that just have a separate entrance, maybe from the garage or from a backyard or from a side yard, and could go into a separate living space. But really it's just part of the single family home, and potentially a mom or dad lives there. Is that a secondary dwelling unit? Like, how gray is that?
Just with the lead of the question, of course, it ends up into a gray area. And anytime you end up in a gray area, it's always best to make sure that you're covering your bases.
Right, and that you're comfortable with whatever it is. If you were prepared
with the risk of, exactly.
prepared to use it as a single-family dwelling, then it's a single-family dwelling.
Precisely.
Isn't that interesting? That's awesome. So what are the specific regulations that pertain to secondary dwelling units, Matt?
The first is the Building Code Act. It's an Ontario piece of legislation, and the regulation that goes along with it is the Building Code. That's going to dictate how the unit must be built, and then along with that is the Fire Code, which is as well provincial. That will set out how it should be built and the standards that it must meet. Again, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if you're in a heritage home, there's going to be restrictions on what you can do to the home, just generally
based
speaking.
on a heritage designation,
heritage requirements and stuff like that. And so there are a number of different specialized pieces of legislation that you have to work around. But generally speaking, you need to make sure that it meets the Building Code and Fire Code. And
the Building Code and the Fire Code can be found on the government websites?
Yep. They can be found on the government of Ontario. I think it's called e-laws. And then each municipality, generally speaking, because they want people to actually follow these regulations, will have frequently asked questions and that sort of thing on it as well. So the City of Ottawa has information pages on it as well.
Right, and if you're not in the City of Ottawa, if you're out in Russell, well, now you're in a different jurisdiction. If you're in Kemptville, you're in a different jurisdiction. South Mountain, as you get outside what is considered Ottawa, City of Ottawa, so then you would be going to the municipal office there.
Precisely, and they should have information.
Oh, I'm pretty sure. Every time I've gone, they have lots of information. Information, there's no shortage of
no
these
shortage
days.
of. They have a vested interest in you following these codes.
So now we're going to talk about properties that don't already have a secondary dwelling unit, because that's what we've sort of been chatting about now. Let's talk about one where we want to add the secondary dwelling unit. What do if I'm the homeowner, what do I have to do?
You have to apply for a building permit. The Ontario government requires that any construction or demolition on an existing building, including improvements, including anything to the structural, adding windows, adding doors.
Replacing windows and doors is fine.
Replacing windows and doors is fine. No building requirement.
So if I'm upgrading my home, that's not an issue.
No.
It's if I'm changing the structure.
To the structure of the home, or adding to it.
Right, or making it larger.
Yeah.
Right, like look, adding to it could be adding space, or it could be adding partition walls, or adding a secondary dwelling within space that already exists.
Precisely. Yeah.
So I need to get a building permit.
Yes, you do.
Okay, and I'm going to get that from?
The City of Ottawa can provide.
Perfect, or the municipality, depending on where the home is. Okay,
exactly.
Perfect. Anything about room sizes that I have to think about?
Now that was the odd one that I ran into. Even something as simple as how large the rooms that you're going to build is specified, and so if you've decided to just kind of put something together in your basement because you've got a family member moving in, you think this is not a big deal. I can get a kitchen here, I can get a bathroom there. But each of those rooms have specific requirements, minimum facilities and bathrooms, and minimum room sizes to account for, so that you're not violating building codes.
Wow! So the building code's pretty comprehensive.
If you want to visit it on e-laws, the Ontario government website. It will actually bring it up on a single page, and it's absolutely enormous. And so the specific the specific area that you need to worry about, you can pull out and go from there.
Well, that's good. So what about size of windows?
Windows, if you've got a secondary unit, you need to provide for an alternative exit besides the door that they come in, and so it must have at least one window which is large enough and which can accommodate somebody crawling out of it.
And low enough as well? Like,
it needs to be within. It needs to be capable of having somebody climb out it. If it's 12 feet up, it doesn't.
Right, it doesn't work.
If it's the
Unless
size,
there's a ladder.
yeah. If there's a CD case, if it's the size of a CD case, it's not going to work.
Right.
But yeah, you need to provide for that secondary exit.
Okay, so there has to be two ways out, not just the way out that you came in.
One window at least that can
Okay,
provide for that.
can provide for that. Okay. Now, fire code you mentioned briefly.
Yes.
Fire code when you're building versus purchasing something that already has an in-law suite. Is that any different? Is there any grandfathering that would have existed in one that already exists?
The safest way to go is to get an inspector in there. Now, a licensed and qualified and experienced inspector will be able to tell you whether it complies with the building code and fire code as they are. The safest way to do it always is to make sure that you're up to current code.
Okay, perfect. And should people come and see you, Matt, before or after they've put an offer in on that kind of property?
I think that there is a certain amount of value to getting a full awareness of the issues before you put in an offer on a house like that. Besides code, you need to think about CRA, like we talked about before. You need to think about
CRA being?
Sorry, Canada Revenue Agency.
Okay, I don't think we've talked about them yet, so we'll talk about them in just a minute.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And
at least it's forefront in your mind.
Is.
That's perfect.
Yeah, the income from CRA. You need to think about the increase of the value and the increase in property taxes. You need to think about increases to your home insurance and make sure that your insurance company knows. These are the type of things that somebody should be aware of beforehand, and so they should be talking to realtors about that issue and lawyers perhaps as well.
Okay, and so you'll still review the agreement of purchase and sale once they've put an offer in on something, so that's perfect. And where can they go beyond the building code and beyond the fire code and beyond the CRA, those regulations? Is there another great source of good information on secondary dwelling units that's more from a layman's perspective?
The municipalities, like I said, have a vested interest.
That's not layman, though.
Oh, I'm sorry, the cities.
The cities, I understand that, but I'm thinking somebody...
Oh, no, the website. The websites are really quite...
They're quite simple?
They're quite useful, yeah. They have frequently asked questions, and they have it laid out very nicely to be able to...
Okay, so I would understand it.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, quite good information.
Okay, excellent. What about earning income? Well, you've addressed briefly, we started to address the thought of income.
Yeah.
What would you tell me about that?
Any rent that you get from your rental unit, from the secondary dwelling unit, is income under the Income Tax Act and has to be declared along with all the other income that you make. And so CRA needs to know about that. If you don't, you take a risk. If they catch you, you end up with fines, with charges, and it's all sorts of nastiness.
It's not fun.
No.
So if you're just joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate with the Decker team, I'm here with Matt Mayo from McLean's Law Services, and we're chatting about secondary dwelling units, primarily in-law suites and that kind of thing. And so if you haven't caught it all at this point, you want to go back and catch the first half. So we're talking about income, which is always nice. People love income. That's kind of nice. What about things like the sewer or the septic? Because depending on whether you're in a country or you're in the city, they would be a little bit different.
Yeah, the sewer and septic and water that you have coming into your home assumes a certain load. If you're adding a secondary dwelling unit with yet another family, you increase that load, and it becomes a problem even more so out in the country when you have a septic system that has only been designed for a certain purpose. And so the extra load on your utilities has to be taken into account before you install one or when you're buying one.
Okay. And so that could mean a new septic system. It could mean addition to your septic system. It really just depends.
Yeah, or as well to your hot water systems or your water systems if you're on a well, filtering, all that sort of thing. And taking that to its logical conclusion, if you don't do that, the increased load may cause service interruptions, which runs you into problems with your renters, which can run you into problems with your the residential tenancies board and such like that.
So there's all kinds of things
Yeah.
to consider.
You want to make sure that you have everything taken care of first.
Okay. And what about the cost of operating something like that?
Well, of course, as a landlord, you're responsible for keeping the unit up to a standard of repair that is suitable for human habitation. The renters are certainly not going to be required to maintain your property beyond the minimum level of somebody living
Right.
there.
So the Tenant Protection Act now,
Yeah.
we haven't talked about that act yet.
The Residential
That's-
Tenancies Act, yeah.
Yeah, Residential Tenancies Act.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that requires you to provide full-time utilities and exclusive use and secure use of the property for the renters, and so you need to be capable of providing those services.
Perfect. Now, in-law suite, where I'm just having a family member live there and I'm not charging rent, not charging anything, I just have somebody living in my secondary dwelling. How does that differ in terms of regulations?
Well, you don't have to worry about CRA at that point. You're
Right.
not actually gaining any income, and so you don't have to worry about that. If the unit is deemed to be a secondary dwelling unit, you still have to be able to provide for building code and fire code requirements.
Okay, perfect. So if I just had an extra family move into my space and
Well,
I
that's
didn't have a
different, yeah.
secondary dwelling unit,
No, that's
that's a totally different conversation.
totally different
And my
conversation, yeah.
septic doesn't have to be increased and...
No. You run into the same ideas conceptually that the increased number of people in your house is still going to put a load on your system. But if it's not a permanent situation, then you may not have to consider it quite so much.
Okay, perfect. So complying with regulations and codes and all that sort of stuff, I'm assuming costs a fair bit of money. What kind of money are we talking about, Matt?
Well, complying with the codes and making sure that you build, that's going to increase your building costs. It's going to increase your administration costs to actually get your permits and such. The costs that I would be more concerned with actually as a homeowner wanting to put one of these in is the cost of noncompliance. The cost of noncompliance are intentionally higher because the province and the municipalities are more interested in you following these codes than they are in allowing you to kind of sneak under the radar. And so the penalties can be quite substantial with the building code. Failure to follow the building code can result in a conviction with up to a $50,000 fine on the first conviction and up to $100,000 on every subsequent conviction.
Okay.
If there's persistent noncompliance, the government can, yes, a $10,000 fine for every day that the noncompliance continues. And there's similar stuff when you come to fire code. Persistent noncompliance with the fire code can actually result in the closing of your property, the forced closing of the
dwelling
property.
unit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, really hefty fines when it comes to noncompliance. So
So you want to do it right.
you want to do it right. You got to do it right.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So failing to comply is not something you want to do.
Getting caught is not something you want to do, and that's always the risk with noncompliance.
Right. Okay. So in terms of your actual law practice, Matt, are you accepting new clients at this point? What kind of, and what does that look like? What kind of client would be your ideal client?
The ideal client. The ideal client is the client that requires legal services to help them buy a house.
Okay.
So we're accepting new clients and buyers, purchasers, refinancing, or sellers as well. We also, because like I said, we're a full service firm, so we're accepting clients on wills and estates matters, on civil litigation, on some criminal defense as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So when I've heard you say criminal defense, and then I've also heard real estate, and those for me are pretty far removed. I'm thinking they have a very different skill set even from the lawyer's perspective as to how they're operating. So what would our primary difference be between real estate law, how do you function, and then say criminal law?
Well, the difference between working as a real estate lawyer and a criminal lawyer really is the difference between a warrior and a diplomat. Okay. When you have two sides that do not have the same interests in mind, the lawyer acts as an agent only for that person. And
so that would be criminal.
Yeah, in criminal law, as the lawyer there, you are doing everything you can to squeeze every interest out of the situation that you can for your client. When you're working with real estate, the first interest is always the client's. However, you've got a bit of a different role because you want the deal to go through.
Right. So you're looking for a win-win.
You need a win-win.
Right.
You need a win-win on real estate. Otherwise, deals fall apart, and people get sued, and it's all sorts of not.
It's
fun.
not a lot of fun.
No, it's not a lot of fun. And so instead we, move closing dates, and we adjust the requirements so that everybody comes out on top.
Okay, so it takes a lot more.
We work with the other side.
Right, it's more collaborative.
Oh, very collaborative.
Is that the right word?
Yeah,
when it comes to real estate, yes, you're representing your own client, except there is a common interest to make this happen.
And there's an enormous amount of cooperation that happens between the different law offices. So you get to know the different people at the different law offices very well, and because you're relying on them to have information go back and forth really well, and that makes everybody's job easier, then the cooperation just has to happen and does happen.
Okay, whereas in criminal law, it's not quite like that.
Not quite so much. You form relationships with crowns, and they trust you. Sorry, that's Crown Attorney, the prosecutors, but they know that you don't have the same relationship with them as you do with your client, and your client's interests are key at that point.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us on the Inside Track, and we've been talking about secondary dwelling units, and I have a wonderful property that actually has an in-law suite that is for sale in Russell. It's at $350,000, so incredibly affordable. It's been there quite some time, and Mom was living in the home, and so a lot of times there's not been rent charged, so it's not an income property. It simply has the opportunity for a person to be living there on site with the family, and so the care can be shared.
Right.
And that's so it's wonderful. It's $350,000. If you are interested in that property, you want to give us a call at the Decker team at 613-860-4663, 613-860-4663. Or, of course, you can go to deckerteam.com and find that property as well as many, many other properties. We've got lots that don't have in-law suites. We have lots where it's just simply the space is large enough to allow for multi-generational living. We're seeing more and more of the multi-generational family situations these days, which is wonderful. So, if you're interested in that, give us a call. If you are interested in a small condo downtown, we can help you with that, or even a big country property. We just helped somebody sell a property on Howe Island on a waterfront on the St. Lawrence, actually, a big, beautiful, recently built home. So from historical things right to... right through. So if you're interested in anything like that, give us a shout. And if you have an idea for a show, something you think, why have they not talked about that yet? Then you'll want to give us a call and introduce us to the topic. And if you yourself would like to be a guest on the show, then give us a call. We can have a quick conversation. You'll probably talk to our client care coordinator initially, and she'll sort of assess whether there's a great fit or not. And if there is, then you'll chat with Ken or myself, and then we'll get you on the show and let everybody hear about it. And anybody that is featured on the show actually has the opportunity to get the footage, because it's both video and audio, and take it and promote it on their websites or in their Twittering and Facebooking and that kind of thing. So if that is something you'd like us to do, is help you promote your business, as long as it's a great one, then please let us know and we'll work on that as well. So Matt, back to secondary dwelling units.
Yes.
What is something that you'd want to leave our listeners with? What is vitally important? What's that one? If you could tell somebody one thing about secondary dwelling units.
Though that there's a certain amount of risk that goes along with them, there's a huge opportunity to be had in a secondary dwelling unit. And so as long as you do your homework and you get the people with you and on side to make sure that it's good. It's a fantastic opportunity to be able to kind of either supplement your income or have a family member come live with you.
So opportunity. Opportunity is what we are all about.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in this opportunity or any income type property, we do run a wealth building workshop on the second Thursday of every month. I've been running them for years and years now. Often the room fills up, not always though. When it doesn't, you get a little more one-on-one attention. Anyway, if you are interested in a workshop on wealth building, one of the things we cover is secondary dwelling units as well as multi-income type properties. So if you're interested, again, you know how to get a hold of us, deckerteam.com. If you have questions you want us to answer, deckerteam@chri.ca is where you want to go so that you can post them right there and we will answer them on an upcoming show. So Matt, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure,
it has been such a pleasure to have you here, and hopefully we'll get to have you back again. And if you have questions for Matt, you know what to do. And how do you get a hold of your law firm?
Our phone number is 613-695-6774. You can also visit our website at www.mcleans.com.
And is it McLean with an A or just a...
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's McLeans. Lawyers.com.
How easy is that?
How easy.
So thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on real estate. So for everything real estate, give us a call and we'll help you out. Have a great day.